Soon, soon.
Okay. So tonight, we are honored to present a book marking the 25th anniversary of our association, Net One. The title of the book is Togetherness, Media and Communication for Peace, under the leadership of Isabel Gatti from Argentina. She's here with us. She's the head of Net One International. And with the work of our International Commission, this volume was born from the Global Symposium held on November 8 to 9, 2024. It brings together communicators and scholars from around the world who seek to renew the dialogue on the foundational values of ethical communication. The title, Togetherness, evokes what this book stands for: a space of encounter where communication becomes a pathway to peace. Net One, founded by Chiara Lubick 25 years ago, is a community of communicators committed to building a borderless field of dialogue, sharing experiences, projects, training, and cultural initiatives that support peace and social renewal, environmental care, and dignity. It is a network that connects knowledge, cultures, faiths, and territories, weaving relationships between the virtual and the real. For Asia and Oceania, a regional theme for the launch is media, synodality, and accompaniment. My own contribution to the book, Media, Synodality, and the Art of Accompaniment, reflects my journey as a Filipino journalist formed by the spirituality of unity of the Focolare. Over the years, I have discovered that media is not only about information, it is about relationship. It is about listening, discerning, and walking with people, which lies at the heart of synodality, as promoted by Pope Francis. From my early formation in the seminary to my years with New City Magazine, I learned that communication, rooted in the art of loving, can build bridges, heal divisions, and give voice to those often left unseen. Our national experience, from the hope of EDSA to the courage of Maria Ressa, reminds us that truth telling is both a civic duty and a spiritual mission. Today, accompanying young people in the digital age, so immersed in the digital age, I see how deeply they long for authenticity and connection. Media, when lived with faith and fraternity, can guide them toward compassion, unity, and peace. In the end, this paper and this book affirm a simple but profound conviction. Communication, when rooted in love, becomes a form of accompaniment and a path towards a more united human family. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for accepting our invitation for this evening to celebrate the 25 years of Net One. And our theme for this conference is Digital Generation, Understanding Mental Health in Young People and Social Media's Role in Youth Suicide Risk, which really is an urgent, something which is so urgent today. So we thank our resource speakers, social media influencer Mimo Perez, Dr. Mark Joseph Lorenzo, and Joseph Siazon, Master in Psychology, for helping us explore how can we safeguard life, foster resilience, and offer hope. So, yeah, today, this is a very sensitive issue, and it's so crucial, especially at it intersects with mental health, relationship, and our digital environment. Globally, suicide remains one of the leading causes of death among young people. Behind every statistic is a story, a person who struggled, a community that grieved, and systems that weren't able to respond in time. So let's begin now with a question to our panelists, Mimo, Joseph, and if Dr. Mark is here, MJ. Yeah, from your professional viewpoint, what do you see as the most significant forces driving suicide risk among young people today, psychologically, socially, or digitally? Which of these are still being overlooked? So welcome, Dr. MJ, Mimo, Joseph. Also, you may introduce yourselves. So whom shall we start with? Maybe we can start with Mimo, then Joseph, then MJ.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening from the Philippines. My name is Mimo Perez, and yeah, I am introduced here as a social media influencer. Although I have a bit of training also in psychology, and for more than 10 years now, my wife and I provide, we call it Ministry of Accompaniment. We design and conduct training programs using a psycho-spiritual approach. That's it's the same approach that I use in my social media accounts. There, of course, I still feel part of this family. So I guess that's enough introduction. Joseph, your turn.
I thought you were going to answer first. Anyway,
Ganun
yes.
ba? Sorry, sige. Sasagutin ko na. Sorry,
Yes,
I'm speaking in
If I,
tongues. So should I
actually, I can.
answer the question?
yes, Mimo. Yes.
Okay.
So
From my experience, not to brag, but I've been providing accompaniment for 30 years now. And from my experience accompanying young people, especially, the greatest forces driving suicide risk today, I would name three. First, the deep emotional wounds that young people carry. Number two, the weakening of genuine human connection, the lack of meaningful connection. And third, the pressures of digital life that tell them you are not good enough. So if I have to quickly break it down, um, psychologically, many youth struggle with unprocessed pain and quiet battles. They are feel ashamed to speak about socially. They long for connection, and yet while they long for connection and belonging, they feel isolated even in their own homes, and this is a fact. And number three, digitally, the culture of comparison erodes this sense of identity and worth. Now, that part of the question which asks, what do we usually overlook? I would say a profound spiritual hunger, a longing for meaning, for purpose, or if I would put it in a spiritual way, they long for a place where they can rest in God's unconditional love. When this spiritual hunger is not met, even a small crisis for a young people can feel very overwhelming, I would say. And so as a community, I believe our mission is to create safe spaces for young people, spaces for compassion, for listening, for authentic connection. There.
how about you,
Okay.
Joseph?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mimo, for those input that you have just shared to us. Now, because I would also like to connect to what was already shared by Mimo. Now, because if we are going to First of all, my name is Joseph, and I'm a Focolarino, a consecrated lay of the Focolare movement, currently assigned here in the Mariapolis piece of Tagaytay. And this year, I finally concluded my journey in my master's, no, my master's in clinical psychology. So yes, so I consider more myself really as an advocate of mental health, because my journey also towards the helping profession was a very, I think it was through circumstances, through meaningful dialogues with people, no? And then I really began to understand that my passion was more on this one, accompaniment especially, no? The helping profession.
Yeah.
But I understood also that it's not enough that we have this passion, we have this advocacy for mental health. We also need to know the science behind it. So I really took the time to really also study, no, the science behind um, mental illnesses and the nature of these challenges that a lot of us really undergo. Okay, and if you will permit me to say something also, I would like to base my answer also with the recent research that is very much available online. Okay, because you know if we are going to look at it in a wider perspective, now what we're seeing today, because I really love that question one time that my professor had, no, so she was asking us, and I would like to ask the same question. Do you think that the younger generations are very fragile now? Who says can you give a thumbs up if you believe that the younger generations are fragile? Sige nga.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Yes, so
Yes.
I see a lot of yes, no? But it is important to know, it is important probably that I share to you that it's not only the younger generations that are fragile, because all of us are
Yes.
are subject to fragility, no? Each generation has its own how do you say this, challenges, set of challenges. We had our challenges, no, those born in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, each generation. So we have moments of fragility also as human beings, as we journey, no, in what we call life. So it's not only the younger generations, okay? So we have to remember that all of us are fragile, now fragile human beings. And I think that today, what we're seeing today, especially when it comes to the younger generation, is the cumulative effect of an overloaded emotional system. No, kasi psychologically, young people are trying to develop their identity, especially in that particular age, no, and try to regulate their emotions while living in an environment that rarely gives them rest. Ayan, all 24 hours, my goodness, no? You can just imagine the social media. They're constantly asked to be on, no? I mean, yung parang switch off and on, lagi naka-on yan, no? Not only academically, no, but emotionally and socially. So, um, I would also, as what Mimo already mentioned, no, three, no, there is this identity pressure at an early age pa lang, no? Sasabihin, they're asking themselves, who am I supposed to be? What future am I preparing for? And how should I present myself? Ayan, something new online, because the older generation, they don't have that, no? And at an early age, I think these are heavy questions for a developing brain, no? Like those of the teenagers. And then socially also, sad to say, no, it's a reality. And yun nga, I was saying that I would like to give an answer that is also based on the current researches, no? Because socially, many families now are more fragmented, no? Even if they live under one roof,
Correct.
parents really are, although they have work hours that are very long, no? And social support systems, kagaya ng sinabi ni Mimo, have weakened, no? Many teens say na naririnig ko, especially those that I talk to, no, they always say, I don't want to burden anyone anymore. So that silent suffering increases increases risk more than we realize, no. And then digitally, I think the biggest factor is the removal of boundaries, no. I'm sure you would all agree, especially sa social media. My goodness, no? Biggest factor talaga ngayon is the removal of certain boundaries that we have had, no, when we didn't have that particular environment, that digital environment, no. So what's new today is that young people have no sometimes wala na silang recovery time. They don't have recovery time. No, a conflict at school doesn't end at school. Kung continue pa yan, magme-message pa yan, magpa-private message, mag-screenshot, etc., etc. No, replayed and replayed all over again. So their nervous system is high on alert, no? More often now. No, kasi sabi ko nga hindi nagsa-stop yan mag-aaway sa school. Mamaya-maya magpo-post na ng ganito, magpo-post na ng ganito sa social media. And it continues. And then it spreads like wildfire, no? Yung tinatawag natin, nag-viral ka na, no? And then I
Joseph,
think
we are asking if you can speak in English because we have many international
okay,
participants.
okay. Sorry. My goodness. Yeah. Now because yes, I was explaining, no? So what's new today is that young people have no recovery time. A conflict at school doesn't end at school. A mistake can be a screenshot, okay? And then video like that, no? It can be captured on video and then shared on the online environment or the online community, and then it can be replayed all over again and again and again just to shame or to bully someone. And then already Mimo spoke about some spiritual aspects that are lacking, no? But I would add more. I also agree with that one, no? And then I think one overlooked factor also is yun nga, no? I would just like to connect. It's the erosion talaga, no? Nag-erode na yung sorry. Um Erosion of emotional rest. No, without stillness, without downtime, and genuine connection also, as Mimo expressed clearly, no? Young people lose the ability to reset, and that makes every struggle feel heavier, no? So, yeah, that's it. No, I would also like to give time to Doc MJ.
Hey, Doc MJ.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me or having me here. Of course, I am MJ. Uh, you can call me MJ. Yeah, I am affiliated with psychological clinics where I provide psychotherapy and connected with academic institution. Well, to answer Kuya Jose, suicide risk is shaped by a multi-layered systems of influence. It's already established by Mimo, no? We now understand suicide through the biopsychosocial spiritual model woven together, no? So in terms of biological, recent research shows genetic predisposition, suicide risk, mood disorders, impulsive vulnerabilities, history of suicides among the families, uh, abnormalities, prefrontal cortex, its side effects. When it comes to psychological factors, of course, automatically when someone committed suicide, it's depressive, no? Anxiety, trauma history, perfectionist tendencies, also the bipolar concerns, those who experience trauma, having personality concerns, black and white thinking, hopelessness, child abuse, attachment issues, even relational like betrayal. No? And when it comes to social factor, of course, the family conflict, especially in Asian countries, peer rejection, academic pressure, financial stress, breakups, divorce, bereavement, like the cases I usually handle, even job loss, the gender minority, Suicide contagion, we receive a lot of news regarding personalities who committed suicide, no? Community events, even firearms, pesticides. The last one, usually often overlooked but clinically more relevant nowadays, is the spiritual. Before, it's just biological, psychological, and social. It now emerged with the spiritual sense. As we all know, in the European countries, they just removed the spiritual, more on focus on biological, psychological, social. Well, when it comes to spiritual, it includes the feelings of emptiness, existential void, crisis of faith, our beliefs that suffering is punishment, disconnected from God or higher power, even internal conflict from violating our values, spiritual condemnation, even the conflict between identity and religious teaching. And yeah, when it comes to digital, this is our theme for today. Perhaps the most under-recognized force, digital environments now shape our identity, our self-worth, our even conflict, sense of belongingness, and even pathways to suicide. A lot of us are seeing content, whether in TikTok, Facebook, IG, news about suicide, and even using AI. Our younger generations can be guided how to communicate, how to accomplish these ways, no? And it is really an emerging concerns nowadays. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. At least you echoed something which is common, the spiritual thing, this loss of meaning. Thank
Mhm.
you so much for these insights. Maybe I just want to ask a probing question. What early warning signs should families, peers, and institutions watch for? So you may answer, the three of you. Okay. So, what early warning signs should families, peers, and institution watch for? Who would like to start? Okay,
Yeah, I
Mimo.
can go. I can go perhaps. um, I would watch for behaviors of withdrawal. That is one telling sign. When a young person isolates himself or herself, um, or when suddenly a young person stops engaging in an activity that formerly he or she was passionate in. These are some signs. But especially, and this is also from experience, when a young person would articulate or verbalize a sense of unworthiness, I am not good enough, or I don't think I am loved by God because I am sinful. These questions about one's worthiness, or and this is worse, and especially when a young person is surrounded by I have to say this, religious but misplaced religiosity. I would say when there's emphasis. So this, I call this the three biggies, which is very dangerous, not just to our mental, psychological, emotional, but even spiritual health. The three biggies are guilt, shame, and blame. When I say guilt, an adequate amount of guilt is important. That it goes side by side with humility. But excessive guilt and using, misplaced religiosity that is instead of our faith becoming a lift, it becomes a whip. Then that is very dangerous. You should be like this, you should be like that. Yeah, and then this is when comparison happens. Why can't you be like your sister or your cousin or your classmates? Um, when young people exhibit this sense of unworthiness, and it is, reinforced by this outside forces coming from us, supposedly adults who are their primary caregivers, then we should watch out for these behaviors in them and also in ourselves. That's very important. There might be some others, but I let Joseph and MJ to fill in. But those are the first things that come to my mind.
Thank you, Mimo.
Yes, I agree. No, those are concrete red flags, words being spoken by someone who's experiencing suicidal tendencies. Yeah, I would like to share some earliest signs. These are often subtle, and emotional withdrawal is usually the first, as mentioned by Mimo.
Sprinkler,
Yeah,
withdrawal,
of course, persistent sadness,
impact.
hopelessness, isolation, or social withdrawal. Of course, sudden changes in mood, irritability, anger outbursts, giving away possessions, talking about being a burden. I think they have no time to give me enough time to listen. Maybe I will just be a burden for them. No, even decline in work or school performance, over or lack of sleeping or eating. Any irregularity, typically we need to sleep 7 to 9 hours a day, 3 times a day, or 2 times a day. Of course, self-harm behaviors, we can look to our wrists or to our friends. Increased substance abuse, and yeah, death-related statements like, I feel I cannot go on. No, I think I have limited time. Yeah, it's like my life is like a candle burning. Of course, major breakups and failures.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, so I
Thank
think
you.
the is Path Warm framework already is already complete, no? The one that was presented by MJ. It's very how do you say it? It's a beautiful framework for us to have, especially if we are going to watch those signs, no? That that will help us identify if there are suicidal tendencies. Now, because for example, a normally social teen, no, when that particular teenager becomes quieter or avoids activities they used to enjoy, yeah, and that can be a sign already, no. And then physical complaints, stomach aches, headaches become more frequent, no, because there are some physical changes also if they are distressed. Okay, so these can affect um, um, the physical health also, no? And then yun nga as what already was mentioned by Mimo and MJ, no? Oversleeping or lack of sleep. And there is also sometimes there are signs related to digital behavior, no? When they are very secretive, no? Increased secrecy regarding online activity or disruptions in sleep patterns due to screen time, no? Sometimes parents cannot monitor anymore how many hours do
Yeah.
they really spend, because the moment that they leave their child in the room, especially if there's the Wi-Fi connection, and even though there's no Wi-Fi, no, they can always buy data, no, from the networks. So as I have mentioned, no, they are online 24/7, so they would really need, no, a time to reset, to just to be still. But sadly, no, it's very difficult nowadays to have that, no. So this can, I would just like to add this one, no, because it can be critical indicators of distress, no. But a lot has been mentioned already by MJ, especially is Path Warm, no, that framework really will help us a lot already. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So maybe you can also answer the three of you, because I know Mimo also is a counselor before you became a media influencer. Yeah. In your clinical experience, what strategies or tools are most effective in identifying hidden suicidal ideation, especially in young people who appear okay or even successful on the outside? Maybe we have missed some red flags. What are the common red flags that we commonly miss? Okay, on this. So how, in your clinical experiences, so you have some strategies on how to identify hidden suicidal ideation.
Yeah, let me go first. It's yeah, I already shared my screens. Yeah. In my clinical experience,
Please
the
go
most
ahead.
yeah, thank you. The most effective tool is paired with relational listening. Of course, many of us are not licensed counselor. As long as we have this listening skills,
Okay.
detecting the red flags, those words mentioned by Nemo, interviewing to detect emotional incongruence, observations of micro expressions, avoiding patterns, those red flags, those words, like I feel like my life is kind of a candle, melting a candle, or I lose hope, I feel demotivated, no? I cannot see myself 10 years or 5 years from now, no? Also asking how their faith, family support, and meaning making. So far, those are the tools that we can effectively identify. There are highly uh, performing depressive individuals. We cannot detect them as if they are being so productive, they can meet the KPIs in their performances, receiving high grades, but despite of that, after closing their doors, they are highly depressive. So these are the red signs or red flag signs that it can help us to detect if they are especially with the young people, hidden suicide ideation. Other than that, yeah, you can look on their wrists, especially those young people who love to wear jackets, even it's a sunny day. Yeah, you can detect them. You can ask them also. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's very practical. Okay, thank you, Doc MJ. Joseph?
Yes, when a young person appears fine on the outside, no, the key, I have learned that the key is to really look beneath performance and yung patterns, as what MJ already mentioned also, no, because in my clinical experience, especially when I accompany people, no, when I do therapy with them, no, I often focus on how they cope. So not just how they feel, because usually high achievers, for example, cope by controlling everything: grades, responsibilities, their schedule. So when their coping becomes rigid or somewhat goes to the extreme side already, that's a sign. That can be a sign that there's an internal world that is struggling. So one technique that I use is exploring the I learned this once as a CBT, because I really like cognitive behavioral therapy approach. So there is what we call exploring the in between moments. Like, for example, I ask questions: how do you feel in the few minutes before bed? Okay, so that's one question that I usually ask my clients. And then, what's the first thought that comes to your mind when you wake up? And then the last question that I usually ask is, when do you feel most disconnected from your family, from your social friends, from your social media friends, etc., etc.? Okay? And those small moments reveal often big truths. And then I also try to normalize really direct questions. No, many young people actually feel relieved when someone asks plainly, hey, do you ever have thoughts about of wanting to escape or disappear? No, so yeah, so I try to normalize, no, in my personal experience with accompanying young people, even adults, no, because they're also, as I have said, no, each each of the generations has experienced some kind of fragility, no, some kind of a struggle also. So yun, yeah, that's it. I maybe Mimo can add something also.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that MJ and Joseph said, but I would add to I mean, at least external observable behaviors when I'm doing counseling, for example, or accompanying a young person. First is when there's the frequency of self-blame, like I'm a burden. This is very, for me, this is one important sign when it's not just unworthiness, but I'm a burden. I'm a nobody. I'd rather be gone. You know, when one doesn't see that, it's like one's lack of self worth leads to feeling that one is a burden. So there, I've been repeating myself too. And second, and more dangerous, I would say, is when a young person simply wouldn't want to communicate. You know, no matter how much I attempt for a I attempt to ask powerful questions, open-ended questions, you know, to pry to start a conversation so that that the young person would but um, when I see that, you know, it not out of shyness, though, no, but I don't want to communicate at all. I don't. I mean, I don't have trust. I'm just here because I was asked to see you. You know, that is, you know, especially if the parents would tell me the same, that not even with friends. That is one very important sign to watch for.
Oh, thank you. So, just a follow-up question. How can schools, families, institutions, even seminaries, create safer spaces for disclosure? Because I know it's hard
Can you
to
go?
share.
Can you say it again, Jose?
How can schools, families, institutions create safer spaces for disclosure? Who would like to
Yep.
start?
Well, for me, we can create a culture where emotional honesty is normal, being normalized, not being punished. As we all know, especially I'm sorry, with the Filipino cultures, it's very common to invalidate someone's feeling.
Okay.
So it's really helpful to at least we have this emotional honesty as part of normal routine in the family, at school, even in seminaries. Yeah, introduce mental health literacy in schools. Teach young people help-seeking behavior. Who is your safe adult other than your family members, especially if their family members are the sources of their distress. No, of course, teach educators, formators, priests to ask gentle check-ins. Yeah, we have this spiritualization technique. No, typically the formators or teachers spiritualize the problem instead seeing this as a psychological or biological or social factor. No, of course, with the family, at least cultivate 5-minute daily emotional check-ins. It is what we call social emotional learning skills. Even if we are too busy at work, no, at least do not miss that 5 minutes check-in with our children. How are you? No invalidation, just let them express themselves, no? Of course, no sermons during disclosure. Simply listen first, no? Of course, yeah, encourage peer support networks, provide visible access to counseling or crisis line, yeah, like this, available and can be seen on the bulletin boards at school or in the seminary. In the family, you can place this or put this on the refrigerator, no, as a reminder that there are resources available where we can reach, no? Yeah, so far po, yeah, for me, that's all.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. That's very informative.
I
Yeah.
100% agree with everything that MJ shared. Exactly, especially the listening part. And I would add, for example, more practical practices that we do, for example, in our own family is we do occasional family meetings when things have to be said, when we feedback. We don't correct always when one is at fault right there and then. So but in when we know that we are kinder. In the opera, we were taught how to do that through the moment of truth, the hour of truth. We can do the same in our families. And so it's especially many families are fail here when we correct more than connect. So we need more connections than corrections. We need instead of comparing, instead of comparison, we need more compassion. And we do that in family meetings. And ano pa ano yun? When adults model vulnerability, that is very encouraging to young people. When as a father or a mother, I can also say, I'm too tired. Can I get a hug? Many times we don't do that. Many times parents would say, I need to be strong. Many are, they need me. I cannot, but what happens when we do that is we don't build resilience. Actually, that's a misplaced resilience because you are faking it. It's not genuine. But it's like giving them permission that you too can be honest with your feelings, because your father, your mother, can also be honest when I'm tired, when I'm angry, when I'm sad. So modeling vulnerability, no, not romanticizing or glamorizing pain, but it's part of emotional regulation, and which is something that is missing in many young people. But adults need to model that for them.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Now we go to the digital era. Are there techniques or interventions that work particularly well in a digital era? So because now social media shapes identity, self-worth, and belonging. In your experience, how does online culture influence both vulnerability to suicide and opportunities for prevention? And what responsibility do content creators have in shaping healthier online environments? So the three of you also can give recommendations, especially Nemo, because you are in the field of influencing. You have many followers online. Yeah. You're mute. Please unmute,
Okay, sorry,
Nemo.
sorry, sorry about that. First, we need to establish that uh, online culture, online space can brings harm in the same way that it opens up a lot of opportunities to do good or to promote kindness. But the digital space weaken a young person's sense of self because of the constant comparison, and it rewards also these um I forgot the term. This the standards of beauty that is really unrealistic. Yeah. Performance, perfection. So it worsens the loneliness and shame that young people are already finding difficult to navigate. But on the other hand, the same platforms can become spaces for healing, especially when social media becomes a space for authenticity and compassion and messages that remind people of their God-given worth. My wife and I are quite big on this in social media or in when we conduct trainings. While social media amplifies self-esteem based on how people perceive us, self-worth, the true self-worth is always based on our being created in the image and likeness of God. So when we use social media to amplify our God-given worth more than the identity based on mistaken identities of worth like fame, beauty, wealth, these are not bad in themselves, but these are limited, if not mistaken, identities of worth. So, and social media can be used to promote this, you know. So it's really it depends on us on how we use this platform because social media can either wound or it can awaken hope in the young people, no? So as social media uh, influencers, we carry a sacred responsibility to speak life, not harm. Um, uh, there, siguro may madadagdag perhaps Joseph and MJ can share more.
Go Joseph, MJ. Some
Okay, Joseph,
recommendation.
go ahead.
They have already expounded a lot of things, no, with regard to this question. But if I would share something, because in today's digital era, we can I think I can suggest that we can blend techniques, no, digital literacy with emotional awareness, because I think it can work well. Now, for example, instead of being like investigators, especially when in the context of the family, no, instead of trying to be like the police, the police of the house, no, I think it would be nice if we ask questions to our kids. For example, how do you feel after scrolling for an hour? No, not a very investigative manner, no, as a detective, no. So I think we can get um how do you say this, inputs from our kids. For example, how do you feel after scrolling after an hour? No, and then does this content lift you up or bring you down? Okay? Kasi because they're, as I have mentioned, no, they're exposed 24/7, if not, no, if not 12 12 3, no, they're exposed 24/7, no, to social media and other online platforms. So teaching them how algorithms influence their emotional state can also give them like a how do you say it, accountability also, no, you can give them power, no. And then there are also apps that we can use, a lot of apps available now, mood tracking apps, online check-ins, and then guided breathing, no. I always really advocate for breathing exercises, because the moment that we start to be aware that we are breathing, just a simple breathing in, breathing out, and then being aware that your lungs are expanding, like that. Now it allows you to be in the present moment. Okay, so and this probably this because we should not also I remember what Chiara Lubick, no, the founders of the Focolare movement, mentioned one time, that we should not be afraid of technology, of this digital world, because we can use it in a very positive way also. And then these things, these apps, this online check-ins, online platforms that are available for mental health support, no, it's helpful, especially when therapy is not immediately available. Okay, and then of course, as what also MJ said, no, there's the crisis line, no, that is available for immediate uh, help, no, if need be. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kuya Joseph and Mimo. No? Actually, I have active clients who were diagnosed with major depressive symptoms because they fell in love with AI. Because they're consulting they are seeking help or advice from ChatGPT. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, sessions, a lot of session just to provide that therapeutic healing, which includes psychiatric intervention. No, so digital risks were not present in past generations, especially baby boomers. No, but with millennials, Gen Z, Alpha, they are the digital natives. We now experience constant comparison, as mentioned by Mimo. Algorithms that amplify distressing content. If you watch suicidal contents, then the social media will provide you those contents. AI companions replacing real social support, just like what Mimo mentioned. Before, we have this uh, classical approach, no, conventional approach that we talk. Let's meet on site, no. Now more on online, even to the extent that they seek help in the online platforms or yeah, online applications. So how we can help them, no, our younger generations? Of course, use digital tools to educate. To of course, digital promotion, instilling values, our faith, help seeking behavior when it comes to parents, you may check their algorithm by clearing histories of their internet sites, phones, or computer. Of course, online counseling. I provide online counseling. Yeah, the crisis line text available in the Philippines, worldwide, and AI mental health literacy tools, how they use properly or ethically these AIs. No? Could you imagine? I have a client who fell in love with the AI because they cannot find someone who can be authentic, available 24/7. So that's the trend. That's what's happening with our younger generation. Yeah. So far, you have more on digital promotion that instills values and human touch, actual human touch, not digital.
Wow. So this is the last question for the three of you. If you could give one actionable recommendation to families, educators, and young people to reduce suicide risk today, what would it be?
Wow. I would say create one genuine moment of meaningful connection. Perhaps a conversation or a simple prayer before meals instead of the usual bless us, oh Lord. You pray from the heart, praying for the intention of your child, of the members of the family, a listening pause, whatever it is. But a moment of genuine connection with the young person daily if necessary, where because it's the simplest, most actionable, I would say, that a young person would feel safe and seen and held and valued. um I'm sure Doc MJ and Joseph would agree with me if I say that one warm, loving, attentive presence can interrupt despair. A love that listens is, often the first doorway to hope, to healing. I believe here. I believe in this fiercely. Um, when I not just a young person, but especially anyone for that matter, but especially a young person, when a young person feels held or by the people around him or her, seen, held by God, by the community, that's when hope begins to rise. And where there is hope, I would say the risk of suicide is non-existent.
Yes, I totally agree also with Mimo, um, saying daily, no? So I think it translates to creating routines, predictable routines that families or family members can really look forward to doing that, no? Because I think it will be helpful not to create those grandiose events in the family or in the house, no, with catered meals, etc., etc. Small micro moments, no, the low budget friendly meals, for example, without screens, without phones. Agreeing, really, no. It's not only the children that should not have their phones, but also the parents, for example. Shared meals that promote genuine connection also with others. Now asking, how was your day? What was the most stressful day that you had? Okay, predictable micro connections, routines, having anime mo daily. So if that becomes like a habit, I think that will also create a meaningful how do you say it, as a consequence, no, you would be able to have that space in creating meaningful conversations, if there is that, no. um Also, for example, you can also I do this one, for example, in as a consecrated lay, no. I live with other Focolarinos in the community. So every time that we are already on the dining table, so we turn off the TV, and then no cell phones, no, because we try to at least ask one another, oh, how was your day? What was the most stressful event that no, how's the kimchi making? Because I have a Korean popo, for example, no. Sometimes he gets stressed with the with the with the daily going to the market, for example, no, haggling with vendors. Like, there's not meaningful conversations. And then of course, for us, it's not probably doable, but for example, for parents who have children who are still young, you can do check-ins before bed. Okay, so did you pray already? What did you ask for, no, before sleeping, no, for what would you like to ask Jesus before you go to bed tonight? Okay, and then yeah, because I think those small rituals, they give you the signal, no, to especially it gives the signal to the younger people that you matter, I am here, no. And then when young people really feel consistently seen by us adults, no, not just in crisis but in ordinary moments of life, no, in the family dynamics, no, I think the risk of suicidal thoughts also decreases dramatically, no, because connection can also be prevention, no, genuine connection, as what was underlined already a lot of times by MJ and Mimo. Now, connection is prevention for me. Yes, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Yeah, I would like to quote Kiara's "Be a Family." We can activate and leave the orange, yellow, violet colors, have genuine daily check-ins with our family members, social-emotional skills among family, go beyond our usual circles, our friends, workmates, classmates, give them your time, validate them, and truly listen, no? I would like also to share the three L's when we detect those red flags. Of course, look, listen, and link. Look, of course, observe and notice how our family members are really doing beyond surface appearances. No, of course, listen, pay attention to what they say, how they feel, how they react, listen without judgment again and or distraction. Lastly, link, connect with them meaningfully. If we can't, then we can refer them to counselor, to a priest, psychiatric consultation, offering support, understanding, and time.
Wow, thank you so much. So maraming salamat as we close this evening. And there's also very good impressions from Mona. Thank you for your participation. As we close this evening's conference, we return to that powerful moment in the gospel. Jesus meeting Thomas, the disciple who dared to voice his doubts. Thomas wasn't weak, he was honest, and because of that honesty, he encountered the risen Lord in a deeply personal way. Our world today is also full of restlessness. People on the streets demanding justice. Kahapon, I was there in EDSA, many of us. Transparency and dignity. And yet, after the rain, a double rainbow rose above us, the protesters. A reminder that even in our unrest, God sends signs of hope. Hope that things can change. Hope that peace is possible. And this is the same peace Jesus offered in that locked room. He entered quietly and said, "Peace be with you." Then he invited Thomas to touch his wounds, not to shame him, but to accompany him in his journey from uncertainty to faith. And Thomas responded with that beautiful cry of the heart, "My Lord and my God." In our time, in this digital age, digitus, the finger, we too touch the world with a single click. Every post, every message, every share can heal or harm, build or destroy. Imagine how many lives we can uplift if we use our digital fingers to spread peace, truth, encouragement, and compassion. So let us not give up on our youth, on our people, on ourselves. The risen Lord already carried our wounds in his own hands, and from those wounds flows a peace stronger than all our restlessness. So we are already concluding. We don't have much time. As we enter Advent, may hope be born anew in our hearts. As Christmas comes, may we recognize Emmanuel, God with us. And as a new year unfolds, may the peace of the risen Christ accompany all to a radiant Lent and Easter. So my heartfelt thanks to Isabel Gatti and the Net1 International Center in Rome, to the Focolare Men of Tagaytay for allowing us to use the Blue House, to Mimo, Joseph, and MJ for their inspiring contributions, to the Gen Boys and Gens for their technical and moral support, and to each of you who participated tonight. Thank you. Grazie. Maraming salamat. Peace, kapayapaan po sa lahat. Shalom, shalom. Salamat po sa inyo. This is
Thank you,
just the start.
everyone.
We will still continue with this discussion, perhaps in a larger convention, congress, and forum. Salamat.